Welcome to Politics Done Right. I am your host, Egberto Willies. This is the progressive program that will take the mystery out of politics. This is the program that will encourage you to make sure government becomes we the people. Whether you are liberal, conservative, or otherwise, you get to air your point of view. Remember, you can also send me a tweet to EGBERTOWILLIES, that is, at Egberto Willies. Let us engage. It is politics done right.
1, 2, 3, 4.
Well, folks, welcome to one more edition of Politics Done Right. I'm Egberto Willies, your host. Thank you so kindly for being a part of the show. We are going to have a great show for you today, as usual. We have today a doctor who has I don't know if I will call it a contrarian view of what we're going through with climate change, but an interesting theory as far as what is really causing climate change. And as you know, on Politics Done Right, what we want to hear is not only do we want to hear different sides of an equation, we want to actually be able to give you that information and have you discern what is practical, what is not, etc., etc., etc. Anyhow, Dr. Peter Ward sheds light on the Green New Deal and landscape of climate change. Dr. Peter Ward discusses Representante Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and Senator Ed Markey's Green New Deal and discusses climate change. Then, of course, you know, in the second segment, it's going to be what we're talking about, Medicare for all, why we must have it, why you have a whole lot of work cut out for you to do it. We're going to get it done. Anyhow, folks, the forces mobilizing for the Green New Deal continue to move forward. Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and Senator Ed Markey are the political baton carriers right now. They unveiled a resolution recently that I will post shortly. Today, we have a special guest to discuss both climate change and the Green New Deal. Dr. Peter Ward worked 27 years with the United States Geological Survey as a research geophysicist, branch chief, and program manager. He helped develop and manage a major national research program, chaired a committee at the White House, testified before Congress, worked on a committee for Vice President Gore, published more than 50 scientific papers, and won 2 national awards for explaining science to the general public. He retired in 1998, working intensely for the past decade trying to resolve several enigmatic observations related to climate change. Ward's analysis and theory are explained in detail on his website and in his new book, What Really Causes Global Warming? Greenhouse Gases or Ozone Depletion? And the answer to that, first of all, welcome aboard Politics Done Right, Dr. Ward. How are you doing today?
It's a pleasure to be here, Alberto.
Absolutely so, sir. First of all, let's go ahead and talk about the Green New Deal. What are your thoughts about the Green New Deal just on the surface, and then we'll go a little bit more in detail a bit further.
Well, of course, one of the real frustrations for the Democrats is that climate change has been basically taken off the table in Washington for the last couple of years. And the Green New Deal is an idealistic way of going forward, not only with solving climate change problem with a major effort, but in the process to try to make a number of improvements that the more liberal Democrats would, have been pushing for a long time. Improvement of many different things. So it's an interesting package, and it's just hit the table. I read it through last night, and there's a lot of good thinking going on there. But I think it's not likely to get anywhere as long as the Senate's controlled by Republicans and with this president. But it's good to have a goal to where we're headed.
Now, given I'll go into the scientific part of your theory. Well, the theory is scientific, but I'll get into that afterwards. But what is your thought with respect to, is this something we should do? Absent Republicans, absent anybody else. Is this something that we should be working towards, in your opinion?
Well, the interesting part is that about in 2006, I discovered a major enigma in climate science that didn't make any sense. Briefly, that at the end of the last ice age, when we warmed out of the ice age, that was the greatest evidence of volcanism in the Greenland ice sheet. And this said that volcanism, some kind of volcanism, caused the warming out of the ice age. And I said, wait a minute, we all know volcanoes cause cooling. Big explosive volcanoes form an aerosol, reflect sunlight, you get cooling. I said, wait a minute, how could volcanoes cause both cooling and warming? And so for 12 years now, I've worked full-time in retirement, trying to understand this, and this has led me to some very interesting issues. The most important one of which is that it's now clear that greenhouse warming theory is mistaken. There's a fundamental problem in the way we're calculating energy and the way our models work that are predicting major problem for the future. So right at the moment, until we get the science straightened out, it's not exactly clear that spending billions of dollars or even trillions of dollars on trying to reduce greenhouse gases is going to solve the problem.
Now, the Green New Deal, there's a whole lot more than just reducing carbon dioxide. It's also things like improving efficiencies and so forth that I think, whether you're solving for climate change or not would actually be certain things that are well worth doing, right? Both economically and for the environment. Yeah,
and I think we have to be very clear that the world is warming. It's warmed about a degree centigrade since 1970.
Right.
And all the data show that. And so the Green New Deal starts off with some of the conclusions from the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, pointing out that we are warming, that storms seem to be getting worse, and this is a major problem. There's no question global warming is happening. And as I'll explain in a minute, humans have caused some of the warming that we've observed. The problem is, as we project into the future, what's going to happen in 10, 20, 30 years, the models that are currently being used are not calculating heat properly. And this problem with calculating heat properly pervades physics. It's a major fundamental problem in science that goes back a couple of hundred years.
Explain.
Basically, about in 1798, it was pointed out, they decided to talk about heat as a flux, an amount of heat per second passing through some area. And so it's a number. You just pick a number, and the sun puts out this much heat at Earth, the Earth puts out this much heat, and so on, as a number. But in 1900, it was shown, based on extensive laboratory data, that heat and temperature are both made up of a spectrum of values, of different frequencies, many, many, many different frequencies. So sun, for example, is not only radiating visible light, it's
infrared and ultraviolet, yeah.
And it's radiating infrared. And all of those, the heat, you need all of those frequencies to radiate heat. At the moment, the way we calculate heat is we assume that the amount of infrared is a measure of its thermal effect. But it isn't. Infrared is a low energy radiation and
Right.
it has a very low thermal effect. Ultraviolet, on the other hand, has a very big thermal effect. It's very high frequency, it's very high energy, and it's what burns your skin. It's what causes cancer.
Let me hold on a second right there, because I want to kind of verify that ultraviolet versus infrared. If I put some piece of matter under an infrared light and I put it under ultraviolet light as well, are you saying, given the same wattage, the transfer of heat on between those two frequencies, that material would get hotter under the ultraviolet spectrum?
Yes. The energy in ultraviolet light is 48 times greater than the energy in the infrared energy absorbed by CO2. 48 times. And the temperature that radiates that, the temperature of a body that radiates ultraviolet, has to be many thousands of degrees. I mean, the sun is 5,000 degrees Kelvin or whatever, or almost 6,000 degrees Kelvin. And it radiates visible light and it radiates infrared light. I mean, ultraviolet light.
Mm-hmm.
Earth, which is only 288 degrees Kelvin, radiates infrared, but it's not hot enough to radiate visible
Ultraviolet.
light or ultraviolet.
Right.
So right there, you can see that. I mean, you can go out and stand in the moonlight for the rest of your life, and you will not get sunburned. When you go out and stand in the sun, even a small amount of sun, you will get sunburned.
But I remember let's talk about ultraviolet and folks. We're going to I'm an engineer, he's a scientist, so we get a little bit technical here because, again, I'll go back to the same question again. When you get burnt with ultraviolet light, you don't feel it until later. In other words, it isn't a temperature. It doesn't change into a temperature that actually burns you. I think there's a different reaction there. Am I not correct?
Yeah, well, what actually burns you is that narrow frequency of ultraviolet light.
Right.
Okay.
But you don't feel it as an elevated degree temperature, like from 1 degree. If I put that less energy on infrared on a body, you actually feel the heat, meaning the change in temperature in degrees of that. Is that correct?
What you perceive as heat,
right,
is everything from infrared to visible to ultraviolet.
Right.
And when you stand out in the sun, you get hot.
Right.
But you don't get as hot as ultraviolet. In other words, temperature has to be all those frequencies. What was shown in 1900 was that a body at a given temperature radiates all these frequencies with all these amplitudes.
Mm-hmm.
Frequency is frequency of oscillation of the bonds
right.
that are together. Matter is made up of a whole lot of atoms held in molecules, and those bonds that hold it all together are all oscillating. And when you heat the matter, they oscillate at a bigger amplitude at every frequency.
Mm-hmm.
So what you perceive of as temperature and what you perceive of as heat is not a single thing. It's all those frequencies happening simultaneously.
I don't think I disagree with you there, but again, from an engineering perspective, again, I can boil water when I get a degree change. I cannot boil water if I use in other words, if I put the same wattage of ultraviolet through water, and as well as, let's say, infrared, I can actually effect a change in heat that causes a thermodynamic effect compared to, let's say, ultraviolet. Is that not right?
Yeah, well, actually, you bring up a very interesting point, because in the oceans, ultraviolet radiation penetrates hundreds of meters
down. Exactly.
Fish are sensitive to infrared, ultraviolet, because that's what they can see. That's what reaches down to depth. And so while we have the ozone layer depleted, which has been happening since 1970, all that ultraviolet is going into the ocean, and the ocean is getting warmer. Everybody agrees the heat content of the ocean is increasing. And you compare that to the increase in greenhouse gases, they're not related. They don't seem to be related. But again, the important point is heat and temperature are the result of energy at a whole variety of frequencies. And a hotter body is radiating a greater amplitude of oscillation at every single one of those frequencies.
Okay, keep telling me a little bit about your theory. And the ultraviolet and infrared distinctions is something that I have to examine a bit further. But let's go ahead and continue with your theory. Well,
the most important thing to recognize is that there's not enough energy in the infrared to cause sunburn, to even make you hotter than what you are. The radiation coming from your body cannot make your body hotter. And one of the ways that I'm showing that it's physically impossible for greenhouse gases to be the explanation for the warming that we're observing is that the radiation from a body cannot cause that body to get warmer. If it did, bodies could spontaneously warm up. Greenhouse gas theory says the radiation from Earth, one way or another, is causing the warming. So at a very high level, just thinking about energy flow, the mistake in greenhouse warming is that the radiation from Earth cannot cause the increase in warming. Now, there are three ways that we argue that they cause the warming. First is a direct heating of the air, and that's never been observed. The second is that the greenhouse gases form a blanket that keep the radiation in Earth and make it warmer.
Well, yes, like an insulative layer.
Right. But if you have a hot rock or it's a hot tea kettle and you put a blanket over it, you will slow the cooling, but you will not make the teapot get hotter.
That is true.
The third argument is that by slowing the cooling of Earth, that makes Earth get hotter. So it's the sun that's warming Earth, but by slowing the cooling, more of that warming stays with Earth. And it turns out that is one of the more popular theories among climate scientists, but that's not the way heat flows. Heat can only flow from hot to cold. And that's the second law of thermodynamics. And so the bottom line is it's physically impossible for greenhouse gases to explain the warming we've observed. And I have a website called physically-impossible.com that tries to explain in common language exactly what I just said. And
now,
diagrams.
Let me say what's interesting here. A lot of I have a very progressive program, and a lot of the people here would want to know, why would I bring a Dr. Ward on? Well, here's an interesting thing, right? I have to do some research now on that the ultraviolet frequency, because again, it is beyond the scope of everything that I did in engineering thus far, and for what I've done thus far, I still seem deep inside to feel that the ultraviolet heating is not, your theory on ultraviolet heating is not correct, but I have to do some research on that. How is this accepted within the general science intelligentsia?
The general story in science today, the way we calculate heat, right, is they integrate as a function of frequency. Mm-hmm. They say there is more of infrared than there is ultraviolet. There's just this little sliver of ultraviolet frequencies that reach Earth. Mm-hmm. And they argue on the basis of the amount of frequencies that infrared energy is hotter than ultraviolet, and that Earth is warmed by infrared, not by ultraviolet. That is exactly the mistake.
Now, when you say that is that's interesting. When you say that is a mistake, why would so many scientists out there not consider what you're saying, that just maybe there's more of this ultraviolet radiation that is being absorbed on Earth?
Well, as one scientist said to me, Peter, if you're right, everything I've done in my life is wrong. So the practical reality is that most climate scientists today learned in school, learned in graduate school, have written papers for as long as they've been alive, proving the greenhouse gas theory makes sense, but they're using a physics that turns out to be mistaken. Now, I'm talking about a major upset in science.
Oh, no, it wouldn't only be a major upset, it would be a major upset in science, but it's also would be a political juggernaut that would sort of create a massive change in our political dynamics in this country. And I'm not only talking about the Republican-Democratic divide, because I'm talking about many other divides here, because this would be very, very huge, assuming that it is correct. And go ahead.
Well, two things there. First, to answer your first question, I'm talking to many of the senior scientists in the world that are the leaders and writers of reports. Mm-hmm. I've submitted papers to the leading journals. Mm-hmm. They refuse to review them. I found that ever since I started questioning greenhouse warming theory, I could not get even accepted for review. And all of the papers I've written and all of the responses I've gotten from editors are on my website. Now, the big problem we're up against is exactly what you said. The greenhouse gas theory at the moment is having a huge upset economically, politically, and it's as we're wrestling over this problem of what do we do about global warming, it really gets down to what we predict is going to happen in the next few decades.
Which is important.
Which is very important. And current theory says it's going to get a lot hotter. And it's the prediction that we're worried about.
But sir, it's actually has been getting hotter in a predictable manner, and to actually in a more predictable, not in a more predictable manner, but it has been getting hotter in a more faster than one would tend to believe based on the calculations, right?
Well, actually, the fit of the calculations to what we observe has not been very good at all. Specifically, from 1945 to 1970, temperatures did not change much. From 1970 to 1998, temperatures increased about a degree centigrade worldwide. From 1998 to 2014, temperatures did not change again. There's a global warming hiatus. There's a lot of debate about it, but there are hundreds of peer-reviewed papers trying to understand what caused that hiatus. From 2014 to 16, it suddenly got hotter again at 5 times the rate before.
Right.
So meanwhile, CO2 is just going up. It's just
Continuously, yeah.
continuously going up.
But there's an issue there, though. I mean, the CO2 has been going up, but the ocean has been a big sink for CO2. So I mean, the relatives amount. I mean, it is not a one-to-one correlation.
Okay, but infrared energy radiated by the atmosphere down to the oceans is absorbed within the first inch of the ocean.
Yeah.
Okay, so what's warm during the day can radiate back at night. What's the infrared, the ultraviolet, on the other hand, penetrates oceans hundreds of meters. So what is absorbed as ultraviolet energy in the ocean cannot be radiated back at night until you heat the whole mixed layer at the top of the ocean. So that is why there's this huge warming going on since 1970 of the heat content in the ocean. And everybody agrees the heat content has been increasing.
That is true.
Content fits exactly the data I'm talking about.
So, so what you're saying then? So explain then in the common terms that everybody else can understand. We don't have to talk ultra. Is that your ozone depletion theory?
Basically, that when you deplete the ozone layer, more ultraviolet B radiation is observed to reach Earth. Earth gets warmer. Earth is observed to get warmer. And because that energy is not being absorbed in the lower stratosphere is observed to get cooler. There are 2 fundamental causes for ozone depletion. One turned out to be the production of chlorofluorocarbon gases by humans, which became really prevalent in 1970. We passed the Montreal Protocol in 1987, and that required the cutback of the production of CFC gases. And sure enough, by 1993, the increase in chlorofluorocarbons stopped. By 1995, the increase in ozone depletion stopped. By 1998, the increase in temperature stopped. Then we had a period of no real significant change in temperature until 2014, when a volcano called Barðabunga in central Iceland oozed out over 33 square miles, 84 square kilometers in 6 months. A lava flow that was the largest lava flow since 1783. And it turns out when you look out through all geologic time, every time there is a major basaltic lava flow, there is a major period of warming. And there were times in geologic history when that lava flow was as large to almost cover the whole United States. So there's an excellent correlation throughout all of geologic history with that issue. Now, what I want to be sure we get to here is really the crux of the problem politically, because you led into this before, and I want to get us back to that. As a scientist, there's nothing more important to me than that the best science available be used to educate public policy. When we set public policy, we want to use the best information we have. And we've had a period now of decades where one party doesn't want to believe the science if it gets in the way, and the other is arguing strongly we have to believe the scientists. And President Obama moved with all the scientific consensus. The greenhouse gases are the cause of the warming. Now that we're finally getting greenhouse gases back on the agenda, back on the table in Washington, we're beginning to realize that they do not appear to be the actual cause. And the more leading scientists I talk to, the harder it is to get them to step back and say, oh, there might be a problem here. They've got so much invested in what's going on. Now, I've had a booth at major scientific meetings now for 4 meetings a year for the last 3 years. And I talk at that booth to over 6,000 people during the course of several days. And what I'm beginning to find is many of the younger scientists are at least open to discussing the possibility. Most of the senior scientists, many of whom I know quite well, just can't face the possibility there might be a problem.
And let me tell you why. I actually want you here, and I want you voicing your opinion, because here's something that, from a political standpoint and as a progressive, the definition of a progressive, the definition of a liberal, the definition is that you really want to stay with the science and you really want to have information. I don't know, Dr. Ward, if your science is right. Okay, like I said, with the basic science that I've done in college, there's an issue with your ultraviolet radiation that I have to go research on my own. It is beyond the heat transfer that we did for engineering, but I'm going to take that seriously. My question to you, however, is why? Why is it that your theory? I know what you're saying. The senior scientists don't want to be right. It almost your tenets almost sound like the way the kind way right-wing Republicans would come out and talk about climate change. So I'm going to get a bit political with you right now and ask you a few questions. And it goes as follows. First of all, do you have a political proclivity?
I am very much in the middle. I've been there all my life. As a civil servant for 27 years, we were not allowed to meddle in politics. But my personal proclivity is right in the middle.
Right in the middle.
What's important to me is not the political implications. It's what is the science, what is the best, what is right.
Now, my next question to you is, when we look at folks like the oil companies, etc., under your theory, they are happy. They can go and dig up all of Venezuela's oil, the largest reserve, and maybe that's why Trump wants to go and invade my part of the world, where he wants to do some bad things to good people. But let me ask you this question. Have you been in contact with any of the oil companies, or any of the oil companies helped you with your research?
Through a former vice president of a major oil company, I tried to get in contact and talk, and there was no interest.
The oil companies don't have an interest in your studies?
What is really interesting to me is over the last few years, I've gotten to know most of the leading scientific skeptics out there, those that are using science to question. Also, many of the political skeptics. I mean, libertarians are the most successful politically at discounting greenhouse gases. I've gotten to know these people. I've been to their meetings. They're not listening to me any more than anybody else. It's really surprising, but everybody has their position, and they've all got
what you're telling me is mind-boggling, okay? I mean, that the oil companies aren't using you as a poster child, I can't understand why.
I've been on Capitol Hill, talked to many staffers there, and to my congressman and congresswoman and to my senators. And there's sort of an interest, but nobody knows what to do. And nobody knows who to trust. I'm not trying to say I'm right. I'm trying to say, look, this seems to work. We need to discuss it.
That's why you're here, sir. That is why you have a platform here. Because, like I said, I only believe in being truthful, and I tell people all the times that if I am wrong, I would come on air and admit that I'm wrong. Now, I have somebody that's watching that says, I wonder, does Egberto ask scientists who support his view their political beliefs? And that's a valid question that he asked there. And the truth is, Daniel, I usually don't. You've listened to enough of my shows that you know that I usually don't. And also, when I bring conservatives on, I don't ask questions like this. But this is a very important matter. What Dr. Ward is talking about is, look, if Dr. Ward is right, if he's correct, I am not even concerned about the scientific community. I am more concerned of what it does economically and politically to not the United States alone. We're talking about the world. And the thing about it is, the way I see it is if there's a new theory that comes into play, right? If there's a new theory that proves otherwise, I would start to say, so how the hell do we work on that new theory? But again, right now what you have is a theory with, I mean, I don't know how many major scientists are with you or have looked at you, or you just went off with your PhD on your own to really figure this out. And this is not to say, you know, I mean, let me tell you something, Doctor. There was a time when a lot of folks also believed the world was flat, and it was most of the people who believed the world was flat. And that's why I don't simply discount things. I mean, if you prove yourself, my God, I would be your cheerleader. But damn, you got to prove yourself.
Well, if I am correct, this is a revolution in science.
Yes, it is.
That is on the level of a flat world or the sun revolving around Earth.
Exactly, and that's my point.
More political and economic importance than either of those did back at the time.
Exactly.
So we ask the question, let's just say that I am correct.
Mm-hmm.
The world proceeds to spend billions of dollars to try to cut back, totally changes the economy to make it carbon free. And then the world doesn't get warmer.
Well, let me.
I would predict from my model that from my understanding of what I'm saying about how global warming works, 2016 would be the hottest year on record, which it was. The 2017 would be cooler, which it was. The 2018 would be cooler, which it was. Okay, so 2018 was the fourth hottest year on record. But 2016 was the hottest year on record. I can give very clear evidence as to why.
Here's the thing, Doctor. Let me just. I'm going to refute you right here, and it goes as follows. Even if you are correct that we're looking at a heating model that's not done correctly. One of the things that you told me offline is, hey, we could actually burn all the oil in the ground and it won't heat the earth up. Okay, I could buy that, but here's what I don't buy. And that is the oceans will get more acidic. We'll get a carbonic acid in the ocean, which will quite change the biology of the ocean. So one of the things that I'm saying is, and I think I asked you this behind the scenes, and that was, okay, so we let's say you're correct. Is it still wrong to try to be as carbon neutral as possible? I don't think so, because there are other negative effects of just throwing a hell of a lot of carbon in the air. There's kind of a reason why nature sequestered it, you know?
Well, there's real value to renewable energy.
Yes.
And when we go decades to centuries ahead in time, we're going to have major renewable energy. The issue is whether burning fossil fuels is causing the warming, and whether we need to cut back on the burning of fossil fuels to do that, to prevent the warming. And I'm saying that is the mistake.
And that's fine. I honestly think, and if you're correct, I want it out there. And, you know, with us doing this show, some amount of folks are going to go ahead and hit your website and research what you're doing and all that kind of stuff. And I think that's a good thing. Now, when it comes to when you make the statement as far as, well, should we spend all this money? I still say yes. And the reason why I say yes is because that's economic activity. That's not only economic activity, but it's a good thing. It prevents the carbonization of the oceans, you know. So there are good reasons above and beyond global warming, even if global warming doesn't occur any further.
One thing we observe very clearly is we know the solubility of CO2 in water.
Right. We know that.
When it comes up, the CO2 comes out.
Right.
You sitting too long in the bar, your beer loses all its bubbles.
Yes, it does.
CO2 comes out. Okay, so if the world is warming, more CO2 should be coming out in the air, which we would see more in the air.
Well, no. I'm not going to let you get away with that one. Because remember what happens deep down in the ocean. Deep down in the ocean, it's dense, and not only is it dense, it is cold, and we get it. You remember what happened with the deep sea horizon, right? Remember what? Tell me about it, and you see what I'm talking about. What happened when they tried to use the thing?
I'm not sure exactly what you're
when we got when we got some of these icicles that were formed that were carbon based. So I mean, we know that is a reality.
Well, we know that the oceans, it's the colder water that absorbs the most CO2, and much of that is coming in through what controls the bottom water has a lot to do with what's surrounding the southern ocean surrounding Antarctica. We know that when the ozone depletion occurred, that it's greatest around the Antarctic Circle. which is exactly where those oceans are, and that we've noticed that those oceans have warmed unusually just recently. But getting back to the question of CO2 and temperature, what we clearly observe in the ice cores in Antarctica over the last 800,000 years is contemporaneous warming and increase in CO2 in the atmosphere and decrease and so on. It's been on many, many times in the last 800,000 years. That correlation is very clear. That correlation can be explained simply by the ocean temperature. And most of the best data that's looked at that correlation shows that the increase in CO2 follows the increase in temperature by several hundred years. So there's this, and what we do know is when we have big lava flows, like we had at the end of the Paleozoic 251 million years ago, it's the sulfur dioxide and the lava flows that form sulfuric acid that causes the oceans to get very, very acidic. The primary ion in the ocean is chlorine. The next one is sulfate. And the sulfate comes from submarine volcanism and from sulfuric acid falling from the sky from other volcanism. So again, some of the ideas we have, there's a lot of arm waving going on about ocean acidity. There are issues there to look at. And I think what we want to make sure that I'm getting across is we need to discuss the science again. The science is not settled. Many people are arguing the science is settled and we've got to remove the CO2 from the atmosphere. I'm saying there's very clear evidence that greenhouse gas theory cannot physically work. We do have to solve global warming, but let's not waste the money doing the wrong thing. What happens if 10 years from now, we've spent a huge amount of money and we're getting cooler?
First of all, let me qualify when you talk about spending money. Based on capitalistic economic theory, the spending of the money would actually be pretty darn good. Okay, I mean, so let's get the science away from what happens. The Green New Deal, the real issue here with the science, I mean, the real issue here with the economy is who are going to be making money in the economy, and of course, the oil companies would love your theory because under conditions right now, they will be making the money for energy, and the people who are going to develop solar and wind and all of that love the Green New Deal because that is where that sector is going to do money. So we won't be wasting money. We'll just be transforming our energy sources. So I am not I would love to explore, and we only have about 3 minutes, but I would love, Dr. Ward, to explore your theory and have your theory relayed, peer reviewed, all that kind of stuff with other people. I think that would be a good thing. That, in my honest opinion, doesn't change my support for the Green New Deal because of all the issues within the Green New Deal and what it represents. And I think, in speaking to you, there are a whole lot of things in the Green New Deal you would continue with as well as a moderate, because you can see some rewards in those issues. Is that correct?
I've talked to a number of senior scientists who said to me, look, this will have good effects no matter what. So let's spend the money, as you're saying.
No, not just, I don't want to just say just spend the money. What I want to say is that it's spending the money for, improvement in things, doing things differently.
No, well, if you're spending the money to get CO2 out of the air, to stop CO2 being put in the air, that is a waste of money because you're not going to have that effect. You may have effects on a lot of other things.
Right, the carbon.
Not the CO2 in the air that is causing the warming that we have observed in the last 40 years.
And what I'm going to tell you, Dr. Ward, is I would really like you to get your, because in looking at your stuff, okay? Mm-hmm. I'm not, like I said, unlike most people who are working on emotions on this issue. For me, it's not about emotions. I mean, there's a political side and then there's a science side. And I do want the science to be right. Now, you're a contrarian. I actually like to I like to work with contrarians. Many times I'm a contrarian myself. So I will hope that that people will give you some peer review so that if you're right, you're right. Or if they can hammer you down, they can as well. I mean, I'm pretty sure that's what you want as well.
I have some peer-reviewed papers out in the literature. They're all on my website, whyclimatechanges.com.
And I have your website on the thing here for people to go to.
I also have a website, physically-impossible.com. It's very short, and I challenge anybody in the world to find any significant problem of what's written on that website. That website is as cogently as I can explain it, explains why greenhouse warming theory is not physically possible. It is at a very high level, and I've tried very hard to write it in a way that you do not need a great deal of engineering or scientific training. It should be readable by anybody that wants to work hard to understand what I'm saying. And I challenge anybody in the world, any scientist, anybody else in the world, to show me a significant problem with the logic that's written on that page.
Dr. Peter Ward, former government scientist and author of What Really Causes Global Warming. His website is whyclimatechanges.com. Look, it was a pleasure having you on, and I really enjoyed the interaction. I really enjoyed listening to the science that you're talking about. I'm going to go do some learning on ultraviolet radiation because, my thermodynamics class wasn't all that good in that particular area. So we'll.
The problem.
I hope.
The equations you want to go look up are the wrong equations. That's the problem.
Well,
you learned in college and engineering.
Mm-hmm.
They work okay in narrow temperature ranges, but when you're talking about 5,000 degrees for the sun and 300 for Earth, that's where they break down. So what you learned is what I'm challenging. It's that basic physics.
Well, great. I love to hear that. I'm going to do some more research. Dr. Peter Ward, thank you so kindly for being here. And you know what? You were actually a good sport because, some scientists just don't like to be challenged. And it seems like you don't mind. Thank you so kindly for being here.
I've been challenged a lot. You can believe it.
Have a good one, sir. Thank you for being here. Okay, you have a wonderful day.
Thank you, Alberto.
Bye-bye. Okay, that was Dr. Peter Ward. It's interesting because I am so glad that I got him. Let me tell you what happened. I had a regular listener that was going to be the guest today. She had something to say about, she wanted to know why is it Democrats were so mad at Howard Schultz for coming in. And she called or she texted and said that she couldn't make it, that we rescheduled that for next Friday. And here I am trying to figure out who am I going to have on for today? And I get an email from Dr. Ward, and I said, you know what? Let's do this. Let's do this. And I can't tell you that I didn't enjoy that conversation, especially since I'm an engineer and I want to, I like doing my engineering thing. But anyhow, before I go any further, folks, I want to remind you that this is a progressive show that needs your assistance, a progressive show that needs your support so that we can keep doing what we do. We bring you truth. We bring different points of view. We make sure that everybody stays informed. Please go to patreon.com, patreon.com/politics done right. Or if you to subscribe, or subscription are very inexpensive, starting at $1.99. I mean, think about that. And because what we're doing is we want to bring in thousands of people to support what we are doing. And I know you love what we're doing because we have to do this. And if you don't want to subscribe, you just want to be a contributor, a donor, please just go to Politics Done Right, politicsdoneright.com. And you make a contribution, make a donation there. Again, this is for subscribing, patreon.com/politicsdoneright, or you can go to our website, politicsdoneright.com. By the way, we can actually take subscriptions on PayPal now. I just remember we changed the algorithm, has an option for doing subscriptions as well. So consider doing that either. If you're not comfortable with Patreon, PayPal is something everybody knows. Look, I really enjoyed having Dr. Ward on. He's a contrarian. A lot of folks don't like to hear when somebody that is putting out a message that you don't necessarily want to hear. Now, I am an engineer by training, and I'm also a political activist, a 100% progressive left-wing political activist. If what Dr. Ward has said has any validity, it does not. And for those people who are concerned or worried, oh my God, what does that mean if he were somehow to get traction, what would that mean for the Green New Deal? Would that mean that it's all over, etc.? No, that's not what it means at all. I see merits in the Green New Deal, no matter what. Even if gas theory, carbon theory was not completely accurate, I still absolutely see reasons for the Green New Deal. As an engineer, as somebody who believes in science, I will never ever close my mind to new information. I will never, and we should never at all. That is why we're called liberals. That's why we're called progressives. We always listen. We always want to learn. So, folks, please go ahead. Please go ahead and consider contributing to Politics Done Right at patreon.com/politics done right. That is patreon.com/politics done right. Or you can go to politicsdoneright.com and make a contribution. Let me see now some messages here we have. Hello from Long Beach, Maywood. Welcome aboard. Sound like this is going to be yes, it is. It was informative. I enjoyed talking to Dr. Ward. Daniel Ledo says, I wonder, does Egberto ask scientists who support his view their political beliefs? Usually I don't. So you got me there, Mr. Ledo. But in this case, my concern is always with oil companies doing what they do. Let's see. LOL, that would be great if progressives use logic. Oh, you don't think we lose logic? Maywood says, oh, conservatives would listen to logic? And Daniel comes back. Do you agree with AOC that the end of the world is in 12 years? AOC didn't mean that. She was speaking figuratively, and you all know that. So let's be realistic here the way we handle this. But anyhow, I made a promise. Several promises I made. First of all, the 10-point plan that I have for Politics Done Right and this progressive show going forward, that continues, my friend. That continues. Now, you can give us a call at any time at our number is, let me see what our number is, 646 716-5812. If you want to say a word or two, 646-716-5812. You want to tell me what you thought about Dr. Ward on the climate change, what he had to say. I mean, I know a lot of you probably are like, oh my God, could it be that it isn't what we thought it was? Well, look, Dr. Ward says that whenever he goes to senior people that they kind of shoo him off because, I mean, it would mean so many things would change. I would like to see him in a forum with a whole lot of these folks who know a hell of a lot more than I do, a hell of a lot more than most of us do, and refute or confirm what he's saying. It would be something that makes one more comfortable. But according to Dr. Ward, it's the ozone depletion that is actually heating the earth. And one of the things he told me, which had concerned me, is that, well, we can burn a whole lot more oil. I am not into that. Even if it weren't for global warming, there are reasons not to do that. Anyhow, I made a promise that what I was going to be doing is talking about Medicare for all at the end of every program. A friend of mine sent me a notice that a family member wrote for the New York Times, for the Week magazine. And the title was, Obamacare would be easier than passing Medicare for all. Oh, no, it says, why do Democrats think expanding Obamacare would be easier than passing Medicare for all? And I tend to agree. I mean, might as well go for the whole enchilada because no matter what, let me read what he says real quickly. Guys, do you know what time it is?
It's time for the weekly blog post.
Okay, the blog post goes as follows, and it's not my words, it's his words from this week, for the week. And it says, in response to Medicare for All's growing popularity, a nervous Democratic Party leadership is repeating a familiar mantra. We all agree that universal affordable coverage is the end goal. A single-payer system where the government provides health coverage for everyone, like Medicare for All, is one way to get there, but another is to build upon the victories of Obamacare, though through expanding Medicaid access and subsidizing private insurance. The implication is that the latter option would be less scary, radical, and politically vexing, and thus more likely to succeed. If that's what Democratic leadership thinks, they're in for a rude awakening. In other words, don't think that it's easier to just modify Obamacare and that it's harder for Medicare for all. Medicare for all, it's not. The matter got shoved into the headlines this week when The Intercept reported on a recent meeting between Wendell Primus, the top health policy advisor to House Speaker Nancy Pelosi, and Blue Cross Blue Shield executives. Primus outlined the standard concerns with Medicare for all: its cost, the furious political opposition it will inspire, and the bureaucratic difficulties difficulty of implementing it. Instead, Primus outlined a strategy for building on Obamacare's successes. He also implied that Democrats and health insurers could band together to pass new laws that free up generic drugs, factor in cut down on pharmaceutical price gouging, and negotiating better prices via Medicare. Now, Primus is hardly a neoliberal sellout. He resigned from the Clinton administration to protest welfare reform. Nor is his liking crazy. Healthcare costs remain stratospheric, but their growth rate is down since Obamacare passed. The Medicaid expansion has been a real success, albeit a slow burn one, and the bulk of health care costs really do come from out of control price of drugs, procedures, and services. The problem rather is the end goal of actual affordable universal coverage. If you're serious about getting there, then the advantage of Primus' preferred strategy largely evaporate. Absolutely so. You can't just piecemeal this baby. By definition, getting everyone health care will require a massive redistribution of resources across society, which is what we must do. Which groups, that's what I'm saying, which groups receive more income and which groups shoulder more costs will change dramatically. The health insurance industry, medical providers, hospitals, and pharmaceutical companies will all be upended, and they should be. This holds true regardless of which route you take to get there. Medicare for all versus building on Obamacare may look different in terms of politics and policy implementation, but those differences camouflage this fundamental similarity. Consider taxes and spending. As they are, Obamacare subsidies are wildly inadequate. Meanwhile, the Medicaid expansion needs to reach all 50 states, and state budget must be shored up long term. Fixing both problems will require hundreds of billions of dollars a year in a new federal spending. Americans would have to pay those new taxes while still shouldering premiums and out-of-pocket costs. That is assuming we're talking universal care under the Obamacare model. Under Medicare for All, premiums and out-of-pocket costs would be replaced by taxes, and then additional taxes would have to be imposed. That's what we spoke about yesterday. But would the final cost burden under either scenario be all that different? Remember that a lot of already existing government spending like Medicare and Medicaid would simply be swapped out for Medicare for All spending. Beyond that, all the premiums and out-of-pocket costs Americans currently pay to private insurers would be swapped out for taxes paid to the government instead, which sounds like a mammoth new tax bill. Of course, but you don't have a premium anymore. But Medicare for All would also cut down on provider prices and overhead, saving a ton of money and reducing the tax bill in the process. That's my point. In the final tally, the additional taxes needed to finance a Medicare for All program would be a fraction of its total cost, probably a few $100 billion a year. And again, that number would adjust up or down depending on how many out-of-pocket costs we leave in the system. And we say zero for those of us like me. Under either scenario, the final cost burden on Americans is roughly the same. Wrong, though. This is one sentence that's wrong in this article, and it goes against what he previously said. And this shouldn't surprise anyone. If the end goal is the same, distribution of resources regardless of the policy route taken, then of course the final cost wouldn't vary that much. Now, you might argue that using Medicare for All, squeeze all of the extra savings out of providers would be a mammoth political fight, and you'd be right. But if you thought we would avoid the hurdle by just building on Obamacare, you'd be wrong. Obamacare subsidies are calculated based on household premiums and expenses. If health care costs go up, federal spending increases. Building on Obamacare would mean bargaining down the cost of drugs using both Medicare and new laws, and bargaining down all other health services and procedures too. We need to get our arms around the whole pricing system. Short of Medicare for All, the best way to do what would be done would be all payer rate system. The government gets the country's health providers together each year, and everyone agrees on reasonable prices. Plenty of Western countries already do this, but it would be, of course, require a massive political brawl with hospital providers. An enormous part of Medicare for All's appeal is its simplicity. Dealing with the private insurance industry as it exists, even on Obamacare exchanges, is a dispiriting hassle when it isn't a hellscape of a rampant financial exploitation, which it is. So far, Americans to get the same benefits from an improved Obamacare that they'd get from Medicare for All, private insurance markets would need to be similarly simple. This will necessitate a big regulatory crackdown on insurers, both to repair the damage done to Obamacare's rule by the GOP, but also to go beyond those rules. Premiums and actuarial values will need to be strictly controlled. Out-of-pocket costs standardized or preferably eliminated entirely, and variation in coverage plans reduced to a minimum. Very good point he just made there. The health insurance industry will fight such an effort tooth and nail. The same goes for implementing a public option worth its salt. That's another necessary piece to build Obamacare route because it applies competitive pressure on insurers and makes sure no marketplace lapses into a monopoly under one insurer. The Democrats might be able to work with insurance industry in the short term to combat providers and drug manufacturers first, but if they're serious about getting coverage for everyone, Democrats will have to turn on the insurers at some point as well. In his presentation to Blue Cross Blue Shield, Primus included creates winners and losers in the list of Medicare for All downside, but creating winners and losers is not a problem for single-payer system. It's a problem for the pursuit of universal and affordable coverage, period. No matter how we get there, the goal will require reforms and a big, scary, and radical. They're big, scary, and radical. There's no shine away from it. So whenever Democrats question Medicare for All, what they're really questioning is universal care, and that is absolute so. Now, here's the deal. Here is the deal. There's one mistake in this paper. One mistake. And that is somehow to equate the cost of Medicare for All. Let me get to the phones right now. I didn't see that. Come on in, telephone call, and then I'll talk about the mistake. You're on? You're on 202? Or rather 209, you're on.
Oh, 202 or 209?
209. You're on.
I'm on?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Hi, Egberto. This is Sally again.
Hey, Sally, how are you doing?
I'm great. How are you?
I'm doing just great. Talk to me, Sally.
Okay. Well, this Medi-Cal for All that they seem to think that can't be done, it is already being done inadvertently. And and the thing is that our government has allowed these insurance companies to get out of control.
You're absolutely
they
right.
They are out of control now, and they seem to think that they're going to tell us how our medical care is going to happen.
Well, that is a whole issue, Sally, and that's what I try to tell people who talk a lot about freedom. When they talk about government takeover of healthcare because the government want to be a single-payer insurance company, most of the people who say that just don't understand what freedom is. Right now, you have hundreds of insurance companies. You don't have any freedom because they decide if they're going to pay your bill or not. And if they tell you that that procedure is not approved, it doesn't matter what a doctor says, the procedure is not approved. You don't have the freedom. However, when you're with the government, we decide as a society what we're going to cover once and for all, and everybody gets on the same playing field. So you're absolutely right, Sally, into saying that the insurance companies are out of control. My solution to that is get rid of them altogether, which is what Medicare for All will do. Get rid of all private insurance companies.
And I'm totally on board with that. We really need to get rid of all the insurance companies.
They are thieves, and they're not only thieves. They are, I call them the thuggish, the biggest piece of the more thuggish portion of our healthcare system, because what they do is they simply collect a check and says we're going to keep 20% and we're going to fit everybody's medical needs in the last 80%. So you're just giving away money to people who are going to pay a bill.
They're parasites.
Exactly.
They're parasites just like all the other billionaires and millionaires in our country.
You are so right.
They're parasites.
And what we need to do now, and this is where I'm coming from, I'm saying, yes, right now we're starting with healthcare, but we need a complete revamping of our economy. We have to start taxing wealth, just like Ocasio-Cortez spoke about, like many others are speaking about. Because right now, Sally, if you have a home, you have wealth, and you're paying every year a piece of your home in taxes. If you have a car, there's a property tax on your car. There's a property tax on so many things. And what are property taxes? Property taxes are wealth taxes. So we need to put a property taxes on stocks, a property tax on bonds, all these things that these people are holding as investments.
Well, the thing about these property taxes is that the wealthy seem to evade them all.
Exactly.
They're not paying their fair share. If they paid their fair share, things wouldn't be as bad as they are. I'm not saying things would be better, but they wouldn't be as bad as they are.
Well, Sally, I'm gonna take a tiny bit of exception and say no, things would be a lot better because remember, I don't think people understand the type of disparity we're talking about. I don't think people understand what the plutocracy have been extracting from you, from me, from everybody else. The middle class folk, people that are making anywhere from $10,000 a year to a couple $1 million a year, they're extracting your blood, they're sucking your blood out of you, and that's how they're able to get billions. Nobody has worked enough to accumulate $1 billion. Nobody. But anyhow, Sally, we are at the end of the show.
In reality, and you are so true in that. In reality, no one could work enough to earn $1 billion in their lifetime, nor can anyone spend $1 billion in their lifetime.
There you go. But anyhow, I'm going to have to let you go.
So why are these people accumulating this wealth that they can never, that they don't need?
Sally, you're right.
And that's why I'm a socialist.
Sally, you're right. You're absolutely right. But we'll talk some other time. Sally, thank you so kindly for calling. I need to start closing down the show.
Yeah, have a great weekend. It's always great to talk to you.
Thank you, ma'am. You have a good one. Okay, let me say, Mike Cisak, welcome aboard. Ismael Alvarez, value and wealth is an illusion in this country. It needs to be fixed. I like that statement. Just put it on the ballot. Growth, what? Okay, Daniel Ladoa, welcome aboard as well. And everybody else. Now, folks, let me do my last pitch, and that is, folks, please remember, this is a call-in show. Not only is this a call-in show, this is a progressive show that needs your support. Please go ahead and go to patreon.com/politicsdoneright. That is patreon.com/politicsdoneright, and subscribe to the show. We are doing great things. We are making sure that people are informed. We are bringing all kind of folks, and not only folks that agree with us. We have conservative supporters. We have progressive supporters. We need the support from thousands of people. Our support level starts at $1.99 and goes all the way up. If you just want to give a contribution to make sure we can keep doing what we're doing, all this equipment costs. And, we bought a whole lot of this equipment on hope, knowing that you're going to support us. So please go ahead and support us at patreon.com/politicsdoneright, or go to politicsdoneright.com and go to our PayPal, and you can either subscribe there at PayPal, or you can go ahead and give a one-time contribution, whatever you're comfortable with. Remember, the other side, they make sure and they keep those people on their side well populated so they can go do their thing. We need to have our people supporting the progressive movement, and we do a whole lot, and we do it a hell of a lot cheaper than they do it. Look, folks, this is Politics Done Right. My name is Egberto Willis. Thank you so kindly for listening today. You know how I end this baby. I am out.
Welcome to Politics Done Right. I am your host, Egberto Willies. This is the progressive program that will take the mystery out of politics. This is the program that will encourage you to make sure government becomes we the people. Whether you are liberal, conservative, or otherwise, you get to air your point of view. Remember, you can also send me a tweet to EGBERTOWILLIES. That is at Egberto Willies. Let us engage. It is Politics Done Right.
1, 2, 3, 4.